The following presentation is intended for educational and informational purposes only. Unauthorized access of a computer is a crime and is chargeable by several local and federal laws, including 18 U.S. Code 1030, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The producer of this video presentation has intended that it be used to promote better network security practices. The creator of this video bears no responsibility for the actions of those outside of the educational scope and venue of this presentation. This presentation will cover the use of the Metasploit Framework to break into a computer and deploy a keystroke logger. One of the most difficult, time-consuming, and unpredictable parts of a network-based intrusion attack is the actual part where you break into the computer itself. This is the culmination of intensive research and reconnaissance on a target. If this was done well, and the target's vulnerabilities are documented, it should lead to a successful entry. The actual entry part oftentimes requires a lot of trial and error. Once inside the target machine, it is referred to in hackerese as owning the box. This presentation is not concerned with the study of the efficacy of exploits. There are entire books and classes dedicated to the art of exploitation. This presentation will demonstrate one of the more popular tools used by hackers when gaining entry into a target machine. This tool is called Metasploit, or the Metasploit Framework. In a simulated environment, I will gain entry into a Windows XP virtual machine using a known exploit. Once inside the machine, I will deploy a payload known as the Meterpreter. This payload has a number of available features which greatly improve post-exploitation capabilities for an attacker or spy. For the sake of time, this demonstration will only focus on two post-exploitation Meterpreter features. These are the desktop snapshot and the keystroke logger. While we are perpetrating this attack, we will be capturing data packets from the victim machine. We'll analyze these afterwards to see what, if anything, of investigative value was collected. In the next section, we will prepare the victim virtual machine for the simulation. We're currently on the victim computer. Before we start the intrusion simulation, we need to do a few things first. The first thing that we need to do is be sure that the network adapter is set to host only. The attacker machine will also be set to this configuration. A host-only setting means that the two participating machines will be in their own private local area network within the host. None of the machines within the LAN will have internet access. The second thing that we need to do is check our network connectivity with the attacker machine. For this particular demonstration, the attack will only work when both machines are on the same subnet and can communicate with each other. In order for me to test network connectivity, I will send an ICMP or ping request to the attacker machine. In this case, I know that the IP address of my attacker machine is 192.168.198.156. It will very likely be different for your machine. As we can see, the two machines are communicating. Next, I'm going to open Wireshark and start capturing packets. We'll examine our findings at the end of the demonstration. The last thing that I'll do before we move to the attacker machine is open Outlook Express. We'll be using this later on in the demonstration. Now let's go back to the attacker platform. We're now back at our Kali Linux attacker machine. The first thing that we need to do here is make sure that our LAN connection is working from this side. I'll open a terminal window and I'll ping the victim machine. The fact I was able to successfully send ping commands to the victim machine means that the LAN connection is functioning correctly from this end. It also means that the network adapter for this machine is already set to host only like the other machine. We're now ready to begin the attack. The first thing that we have to do is bring up the Metasploit Framework from the command line. After the Metasploit Framework has initialized, you'll enter the following command at the MSF prompt. What we've just told Metasploit to do here is use a particular mini program called an exploit to gain entry into our victim computer. Think of an exploit as kind of like a crowbar or some other tool that's used to facilitate getting forbidden access into a building. It's the piece that actually creates the opening so we can get in. The exploit that we're using was based on a Windows vulnerability that corresponds to entry number 49243 in the open source vulnerability database, which you can actually go look up. Specifically, the exploit takes advantage of a flaw in the Microsoft Windows Server service that allows a user to remotely execute arbitrary code. I will now tell Metasploit to use this exploit package. Next, we'll tell Metasploit that who our target is by entering the following code. Now all I have to do is execute the command. I'm now inside the target computer. The payload, which is what we injected into the victim after the entry was leveraged, is called a Meterpreter. A Meterpreter is a tool that allows an attacker to perform several post-exploitation functions. The purpose that it serves is kind of like that of a DOS prompt communication medium between the attacker and the machine. Except unlike a DOS prompt, you can do things like activate a web camera, take desktop snapshots, upload and download files, and you can do all this without having to install additional programs. In order to see all that the Meterpreter can do, simply type help at the prompt. The first command that we're going to issue to the Meterpreter is set desktop. What this command does is set the active desktop within the Meterpreter. By default, the active desktop is the attacker's desktop. If the victim machine has multiple desktops associated with it, you can actually use the Meterpreter to enumerate or itemize all of the available desktops. In this case, there is only one desktop associated with the target machine, so by executing set desktop, we're able to make the victim's desktop the active one. Next, we're going to take a screenshot of the victim's computer workstation desktop. We do this by entering the screenshot command at the Meterpreter prompt. The screenshot's been saved to the root directory. Here, I'll go open it. Okay, now that we've taken a snapshot of our victim's workstation desktop, the next thing that we're going to do is deploy a keystroke logger. A keystroke logger is simply a program or device which has a buffer built into it which stores a quantity of computer keystrokes that are entered by a user. If a keystroke logger is surreptitiously installed onto a computer, an attacker can get passwords and other personal information. In order for us to deploy our keystroke logger, we need to hide it within a currently running process, one that hopefully gets a lot of user input. To find a list of viable candidate processes, simply type PS at the Meterpreter prompt. I went back to the victim computer and I opened Outlook Express. Since we are in a host-only configuration, we currently do not have any network connectivity. However, I can still enter text into an open email document as if I was writing a private message to someone. In order to deploy my keystroke logger into the Outlook Express application, I need to get its currently running process ID. The ID number that I'm looking for is 2472, near the bottom. What I need to do next is migrate the Meterpreter into the Outlook Express process. To migrate the process, we enter the migrate command followed by the process ID number. After the Meterpreter has been successfully migrated to the Outlook Express process, we need to activate our keystroke logger. To do this, we enter the following command at the prompt. Now that our keystroke logger has been activated, let's go back to the XP machine and pretend to be the victim for a minute. I'm now back at the victim machine. Outlook Express is open. I'm going to enter some text into an empty email document. Okay, now that I've entered some text, let's go back to the Kali attack workstation. We're now back at the Meterpreter prompt at the Kali attacker workstation. To see what we captured in our keystroke logger, enter the keyscan dump command at the Meterpreter prompt. As you can see, the keystroke logger captured everything that I wrote within the email document. It even included the times I had to back up and correct myself while typing. If I was really going to deploy a keystroke logger in such a way that it would be of any use, I would have to leave it here for a while. In order to do a full hacker-level deployment, I would also have to set up a backdoor which would allow me to return here to execute another keystroke dump. If the backdoor wasn't available, you could also set up a connection with an external website where the keystroke logger would send its buffer contents. Both of these activities are outside of the scope of this exercise. This is to show you how simple keystroke loggers can be implemented. Most keystroke loggers may be rather simplistic programs, but when used effectively, they can yield more results for hackers than complicated remote access programs, which can often be sniffed out by antivirus and intrusion detection systems. With that in mind, I'll leave you with one last thought. About 5 years ago at the University of Central Florida, A student was caught after breaking into the school's database and altering his grades multiple times. Investigators were never able to figure out how he was able to accomplish this feat. The forensic investigator who told this story did not say how they caught him, but according to the story, as part of the perpetrator's plea deal, he had to tell authorities how he did it so that the vulnerability could be eliminated. The student was able to get to the school's computer multiple times through the use of a simple keystroke logger. Sometimes the most effective methods are the simplest. In the next section, we'll analyze the data packets that we captured during the exercise. These are the network data packets that we captured during our computer exploitation exercise. Unlike the denial of service exercise, you aren't going to find large quantities of foreign suspicious packets that stand out from the normal traffic. At first glance, if you take a look at the protocols, this looks pretty much like normal network traffic. There are address resolution protocol packets, dynamic host control protocol packets, link local multicast name resolution packets. If you were a network analyst and you were looking at this packet capture file, so far nothing would really stand out. But if we look a little further, we begin to see the start of a network connection between two devices. This connection seems to go on for some time. If there was already evidence of a network intrusion, then this provides a little further evidence, including the suspicious IP address that was connected to your workstation. Some deep packet inspection might yield more information, but the payload data for these TCP packets is encrypted, so nothing will appear in clear text. Unfortunately, that's about all we're going to get from this PCAP file. Originally, the term hacker meant someone who was skilled at reverse engineering a particular technology. The term didn't acquire its highly negative connotation until sometime in the mid to late 80s, when some of these people were using their skills to perpetrate crimes. In the nomenclature of hacking, there are three terms which describe the motives of hackers in cyberspace. First, there are the white hats. These are people who supposedly only hack strictly for good. The flip side of that coin is that person who is known as the black hat hacker. The black hat hacker uses his or her skills to achieve only malicious goals. These terms originated from the old Western movies where the villain always wore a black hat and the good guy always wore white. This is a rather oversimplified view of human nature, though. Later, there was a group who became known as the gray hats. Many experts in the field of penetration testing and security agree that the larger majority of people who are involved in hacking fall within this category. Gray hats work for the forces of good, yet dabble in the forces of darkness. Usually the reason for this is to better understand the methods used by the black hat hackers. The exercise we just completed arguably falls within the gray hat category. This is the kind of tactic that a person with malicious intent would use to spy and steal information from another individual. We executed this act of theft and intrusion within a simulated environment to better understand all of the dynamics involved in such an attack. Now that you have seen this, should you run across a victim who's been the target of such an intrusion, you'll be familiar with the modus operandi of such an attack. The term ethical hacking has become the butt of many jokes, as its very title sounds like an oxymoron. A better term to refer to this set of skills is offensive security. In order to truly be an effective practitioner of cybersecurity, you have to be able to think beyond firewalls and intrusion detection systems. Every system and organization has its weak points that are vulnerable to exploitation. A security specialist must be able to think like his opponent, if he wants to be able to have a hope of defeating him. The black hats that we face in our current society aren't just some awkward social misfit computer genius who lives in his parents' basement. They're dedicated foreign military units charged with undermining our infrastructure. They are foreign rogue attackers with their own personal malicious agendas. If we prepare ourselves by understanding the methods used by those who wish to do us harm, we stand a better chance of defeating them before they get the chance to inflict irreparable damage. This ends the presentation.